I'm Halcyon Wilshire-Busby, the Campus Records Manager at the University of the West Indies, Cave campus. And today, our second session, we're exploring ways in preserving information, especially in the digital, as it relates to digital transformation and digitization and so forth. So what we're going to examine are the fundamentals of digitization and managing of digitization projects. So there's certain nuances as it relates to digitalization, and also even a digital transformation project and digital preservation. And some of these things will be examined and explored by our presenters. So I'm going to introduce our presenters. And firstly, we have Mrs. Roma Wong Sang. She is the Senior Archives and Records Officer of the National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago with over 20 years experience in managing information, libraries and archives at the United Nations, Caribbean offices, and at the National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago. She is currently responsible for the Digitization Lab and the audiovisual and digital archiving at the National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago. So she undertakes the archival processing and communications work while providing management support to the Government Archivist. Roma is a holder of a Master's in Archives and Records Management degree from the University of Dundee, and she also has an undergraduate degree in Mass Communications and has a diploma in graphic design. She was also one of the contributors in the first Caribbean Archives Reader published in 2018. Our second presenter is Dr. Forget Chatera Zambuko. She's an assistant professor in records management and archival science at the Sorbonne University, Abu Dhabi. She previously lectured at the National University of Science and Technology and Midland State University in Zimbabwe. She is a rated researcher by the National Research Foundation of South Africa and is co-editor of the Archives and Records Journal. Her research interests include displaced archives, access to archives, and application of emerging technologies in records and archives management and museums and records management. So I would like to first start off with Roma Wong Sang to come present us. Roma, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you allow me to share my screen? And thank you, Halcyon, for that introduction. Digitization, as we know, is currently riding a wave of popularity, of course, thanks to COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has certainly accelerated the move towards e-business and e-services. And even at the National Archives, we were prompted to provide a remote service offering digital scans to our users based on request. It is an area that we have to embrace as we are all in a digital age, and it will become even more complex with increasing born digital information that we will all have to eventually manage. So in my presentation today, I am just going to take you through the nuts and bolts of digitization briefly in my 20 minutes. I'll try as much as possible to keep to the time. I will look at digitization, what it means, getting started, some key enabling factors for success, the digitization process, and of course, I will share some of the lessons learned as well. So digitization, what it means, it really is just simply the process of converting information from the physical or analog format to the digital format. And as you see here, I provided some examples of documents. And when we're talking digitization, it's not alone, it's not only paper-based documents, but we also have other media, photographs, we have microfilm. I'm sure a lot of you have microfilm. I'm speaking to the archivist here. Audiovisual, you have video that's deteriorating pneumatic formats, which we'll need to transfer to make sure we have that content of our post-independence period, which that media more or less would have covered. So in the greater scheme of things, digitization can really be regarded as the foundation of digital transformation. Once in a digital form, that signal can be manipulated, stored, and transmitted more easily than in an analog format through the use of digital technologies. So you can see digitization at the bottom of the pyramid is really the transferring of manual data to digital data. The next step, digitization, really is changing your manual processes to digital processes. And the top part, digital transformation, will happen when you combine the efforts of both to really innovate, to bring value-added services or experiences to your business or organization. So, getting started on a digitization project. Where do we start? I know it can be overwhelming. We hear digitization. We get a lot of requests. So people asking us, how to start, what to do, what to digitize, how to do it, and whatnot. So I want to suggest you begin with the end in mind. What is the expected results you want out of digitization? Is it to lead your organization's digital transformation effort? How is it linked, and how is that linked to the strategic vision of your organization? In the case of archives, is it to save at-risk archives? For instance, I mentioned pneumatic video, which will need saving. Is it to reduce wear and tear of fragile archival documents and perhaps those in high demand? Is it also to facilitate online access to frequently requested records? And is it also to respond to high public expectation? Because after all, we're in a digital age and the expectations are high, both for libraries and archives. In the case of records management, is it to improve access to files and documents through the document and electronic management system to improve productivity and efficiency? Sparkle did a wonderful job in bringing all of this to the fore, so I don't need to go into much detail on that. And once you have defined your goal and asked all these questions, the next step then is really to assess your organizational capabilities, determine what resources exist in-house, staffing, digitization skills, equipment, funding, physical space. And of course, in reviewing your capabilities, if you find there are shortcomings, you may consider outsourcing as well. But the same principles, of course, would obtain, but you will have more meticulous management of that. So here are some of the key enabling factors for success based on my experience of managing digitization at the National Archives. I may be a little more archives oriented than records management, but I will also touch when it's relevant as well. ICT infrastructure. Now this one is critical for success, not only to facilitate the digitization process, but importantly, the long-term viability of digital information. When we are managing digital information, it's only not for tomorrow and for 10 years down the road, it's across generations. How do you do that when technologies are changing, software is changing, the world is changing, everything is changing very quickly? The digital age really brings a lot of challenges. So how do you deal with that? So ICT infrastructure is really the backbone on which the software and hardware lies to ensure that there's security, reliability, authenticity, integrity, and usability of digital records over time. These, what I outline here, are what we call the characteristics of a digital record. And to maintain that over time, how do you do that? So one of the main ways, of course, we have to ensure digital storage and backups are in place. We refer to digital archive storage as a digital repository, and the new standard, ISO standard, refers to trusted digital repository. And I know my colleague will go further into that for digital preservation. And in the case of archives, we are required to store preservation file formats, which are either uncompressed or lossless compressed. Therefore, storage is large. So we are faced with the always incremental need for storage space. Do we have budgets to handle that? How do we handle that? And IT, most importantly, have to retool and add storage every year. Once you digitize, the more you digitize, the more storage you will need to add. Backup storage, of course, locks, we mentioned that before. There are 3 copies. The backup, what is recommended is standard is online, whether it's on a server using RAID. Offline LTO magnetic tapes is one of the preferred ways to do that. And of course, have it offsite somewhere safe. So this is all to protect against threats, accidental deletions, failed hard drives, obsolescence, viruses, and disasters. Of course, we live in the Caribbean. So IT plans must also take into consideration other issues such as bandwidth for efficient transfer of information over networks. For instance, in the lab, when you're transferring files to go to the server, if it's far away, you end up getting error failures and it spins and takes forever. So connectivity issues are so important for the project. Staffing resources, of course, this is important as well. Again, IT staff, we need skilled and agile IT staff to manage and respond to the change in technology over time. And of course, latest developments such as cyber threats, which are increasing. And of course, the ability to move to the next stage of digitalization will require systems analysts and software specialists who can really work collaboratively with the subject matter specialists, the archivists, the librarians, for desired results. Digitization and quality control technicians are important depending on the scope or format of your project. Skills in photography, digital imaging will be required, as you have various types of scanners. You have to deal with image capture and formats with that. And of course, as archivists, records managers, and librarians, we are the information specialists who will determine the metadata to accompany digital files. You cannot just put digital files and store it and expect to file it. How do you locate the files that you want? The file name, basic as it is, file name, are they in folders? The descriptive metadata that links to your whole archival arrangement or your classification or cataloging. Of course, this is one of the key elements of digitization. It must be done according to the standards. And there are standards concerned with digitization. So for instance, with a digital image, you have resolution, which is really pixels per inch or dots per inch. This is give you the sharp image quality you would want. There's bit depth. We talk about bit depth, color depth. And this really is an indication whether it's grayscale or color and the depth of the color and saturation. And then we have color mode, which could be bitonal, which is just black and white, grayscale, of course, for color. So an understanding of these technical requirements are important, but don't get too worried if you need to know all of this. The scanners, depending on the scanners you buy, they will have automatic presets, which you can use to be guided by. So you don't need to get too technical, only maybe for big projects. File formats, you need to understand that when you digitize, there's a master file format, which is really your preservation file format. And without any loss of essential features, that is what the master file format is. It should be use neutral and should be consistent with long-term archival strategy. And from your master file format, you will get derivative files such as JPEG from a TIFF, access files, PNG, PDFs, etc., derived from the master file. And of course, its specification will change depending on your use. And besides image standards, there's also audiovisual digitization standards, and you can refer to the ISS standards, the International Archives and Sound Association. And these are some of the formats, the preservation formats that we use at the archives here, and the derivative format. So for an image, I don't necessarily mean only a photographic image. I refer to text images when you do bound volumes or books. We generate a TIFF, and we also generate a JPEG. Some of these scanners can simultaneously, once we set it, generate both at the same time. Not so with the PDF. When we have finished the process of digitizing, we go and we create the PDFs, depending on if it's, for instance, a bound volume. For audio, broadcast wave is the preservation format, and MP3, of course, we all know is the file format that's available, especially for online. Likewise, for video, we generate these 3 types of preservation formats. We have an audiovisual digitization project, And they are currently involved using a SAMA system, a media migration system, to do this for them as well. MP4, of course, is a derivative from these different formats. A little bit about understanding what is lossless and lossy compression. Files undergo compression depending on its use. Lossless is a form of data compression that reduces file sizes without sacrificing any significant information in the process. It is a reversible process to go back to the original. Lossy compression, though, removes data deemed unnecessary from the image permanently, and it serves to reduce the file size. The rule of thumb is to choose uncompressed or lossless formats for the creation and storage of archival masters, and lossy formats should only be used for delivery and access purposes. So a little bit about scanning software and hardware. Factors to consider in choosing scanners. What type of materials do you have to digitize? What is the sizes of the originals and the quantity? Condition of the materials and how they can be handled. Available physical space, and you'll see why I say that in a bit. Budget, what is your budget to acquire these pieces of equipment? Staff digitization experience. So scanners are available for various media types, photos, microfilm, large documents, etc. Most come with its own proprietary software, some with presets. So also Adobe Creative Suite, Acrobat, Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, also other software for post-digitization. So for instance, we may have researchers coming in, they want to publish a book, or they want to use it in a film, or to blow it up, like we assisted with Memorial Park with the scans for the information boards that are there. So we had to have high-res images and do some editing on some. Of course, we curate our own exhibitions here. We have brochures and we have finding aids that we generate. So we do use our own digital images that we produce in-house. Just to give you an example of the scanners we have in-house, here you see on your left, that's our large format scanner. It's a Zuchel. Yes, it looks like the Rolls Royce of scanners, and it is, in our opinion. And that's Deborah there, our lone digitizing technician at the moment, doing her work. The other one to the top right is the medium format scanner. That's the ICAM that uses a digital camera. And that we use mainly like for smaller documents, files, and of course for books. There's a book cradle that comes with that. So we use that as well. The one in the middle, that's the photo scanner. We use the Epson Perfect Pro, and that's pretty good. It also allows us to scan negatives and transparencies. And of course, the one that I'm using there, that's the microfilm scanner. It's a reader, but it can also scan by frame, though. That's the only little challenge with that machine, which we discovered after the fact. And that's another thing I'd want to say to you, is to do your research well before you purchase, because there are lots of scanners out there. And if you could maybe visit other people to test to see how it works, it might be a little better. And I know for some smaller scale archives, you may not have the wherewithal to get this large investment in the technology, but a simple flatbed scanner can start if you just have small documents for now and photographs, just to get you started. So the other key factors, of course, having a policy in place for digitization and even for digital preservation, how that fits into your organization's strategic goals and priorities, as well as collection management. Intellectual control, and I'm glad Sparkle brought this to the fore, because this is important. You can't just take everything and just digitize. You need some sort of organization, some sort of intellectual control. And we would normally, as archivists or librarians or records management, have this. So records management, we'll have our classification systems. Librarians, our catalog, we would have cataloged our books, and we'd have our MARC or Dublin Core descriptions. And of course, archives will have our ISAG standard to work. So we need to make sure before we go into the digital domain, at least we have that under control before we get there, because you don't want to go and digitize everything and then organize it in a digital domain. That will be more time consuming. A significant point, of course, is management buying. And I know this is one of maybe the most difficult ones for some of you. How do you get them to convince them that you need equipment, or you need to move to that stage of making things accessible. That needs a lot of championing and negotiations, being part of management teams. And also another part, of course, is using your statistics to tell the story. If your users are asking for this, do up some sort of statistics to show, you have to show some evidence why this is needed. And of course, once there's buying, hopefully it will lead to budgeted resources. And of course, the biggest one too is long-term financial sustainability to support hardware and software over time. When my colleagues speak to digital preservation, you will appreciate this one a little bit more. It is really going to be a challenge. And as developing countries with limited resources, and this is going to really be a challenge, I think, for us. So in terms of the digitization process, I will just take you through it very quickly. You start with selecting your collections to be digitized, prepare it. You have the image capture taking place, quality control, very important because, garbage in, garbage out. You need to verify what goes in and ensure it's to the required standards. Of course, then you send it into digital storage. And this is where we stop at the National Archives. We're in the process of getting ready to go out with an RFP for an integrative archival and digital preservation system, which will take all our digital assets stored in a digital storage and our digital repository and hope present a front end where we can give access to our users. And I can tell you, they're anxiously awaiting for this. So I'll start with selection. How do you select? Most archives have several collections. How do you decide what goes first, what goes second? You really need to prioritize. And these are some of the factors you can use to help prioritize. So it can be based on significance. And I'll give the example of the Tobago archives. In 1997, the library in Tobago was closed. As for those who are not familiar with Trinidad and Tobago, put a little map there down at the bottom. Tobago is a little island to the top, and a little boot-shaped one is Trinidad. So we are a twin island state. Tobago normally keeps their own archives, and Trinidad keeps archives as well. They're two archival. But in 1997, there was an earthquake which damaged the Scarborough Library where the archives were held, and so they had to close it in order to rebuild a new building. The archives came to us. Some of it, not all of it, the ones that were in deteriorating condition, for us to restore. By our conservation department. We've had the records here. And once the building was ready to be, the Tobago archive was ready to be reopened, we took a decision that we needed to digitize those records before we send them back to Tobago. I think it's important in this instance, the significance of equity. Equity of access was important. Trinidad and Tobago, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago need to benefit from the archives, whether it's housed in Trinidad and or Tobago. So now Tobago have their restored paper records, but they also have digital records. And we in Trinidad, while we don't have the originals, we do have the digital copies. So we have improved access for both islands. So the other aspect, you can look at use of it. Of course, this will be used here as well because it's going to be access. Preservation is important. Sometimes we have at-risk documents and even audiovisual that we need to preserve in the immediate before it deteriorates or we lose all the content. Condition, if it's far gone, we can't do anything about it. So that's going to be low down on our list. Available funding for a specific project. And of course, if it's out of copyright. So another project we embarked on, this was in 2017, I believe. This was a digitization of the Catholic News, one of the oldest newspapers running still in Trinidad and Tobago from 1892 to 2012. We collaborated with the Archdiocese, Catholic Archdiocese, who got funding from the Vatican to do this. So we got assistance. Someone came here to help with the metadata and QC part of it. And it was launched in 2017. Yes, 2017. So as part of that partner in that program, in that digitization program, they offer access online at a small cost But for the National Archives, we have free access to our users in the search room for this digital archive. So it's similar, it's projects like this. I personally would like to see more, out there. For instance, the Trinidad Guardian needs to be digitized. Perhaps, we need to engage with them to see how best we can work together, because the resources, a lot of resources, and I think we have to share resources really to benefit and get results. And of course, in preparation, one aspect, of course, for the paper-based documents is to evaluate the conditions. If it's really bad, we will have to stabilize. We send it to our conservation lab and they will stabilize before it comes back out up to us. We may have to rehouse the document. There's unfolding, there's removal of staples. There are a lot of things that are required to make sure that there's careful handling of those documents, because we are still responsible for the hard copy. So even though we digitize it, we need to keep it safe as well and store it. This one you're seeing in front of you, that I think was one of the most challenging ones we had to do. This is the index of the Spanish protocols. It wasn't that bad, but the rest of the collection was really bad and is no longer accessible. So we had to take a decision that this has information, because it's an index, it could provide information that could be in those deteriorated documents until we get to restoring. So we were able to digitize this. This took a lot of time and careful handling by Deborah and myself. Actually, I had to assist with this and support it with acid-free paper each time. And so this, I'm happy to say, and of course our users are even more happy that we have digitized this and it's available in our search room as a digital copy. So most of the things that we have digital, for which people have interest and are in demand, we put it in a computer on our search room, only as PDFs for now, until we can get the software on the front end so they can search and discover. But of course, we have to protect the PDFs in the search room. So just a little bit about the preparation workflow and what we do in the lab. So I mentioned before the intellectual control. We need to organize the collection before it gets to us. And most times the archivists will do this. We put it in chronological order and then it comes to us. So for instance, we did the Indian Indentureship General Registers. I would have had to create the original metadata of the registers with the dates and that sort of thing, and then bring them bit by bit to the lab. We have a digitization register for incoming and outgoing so that we can track the records as well in the lab. Of course, maintenance of the scanner area is important. The glass, sometimes the documents are so old, there's dust that comes off it, so it needs to be cleaned for clear images. Importantly, we need to select a file name based on the collection, the series description, and of course, assigning a unique identifier, which will be alphanumeric. So we do that for the collection. Before it reaches the scan, we know what the file name is going to be, so that once you start, and of course the number, we have to get a sense of the numbering of the files, how many it may be. And you put lead-in zeros. So if it's, you think it might be 1,000, you put 0001, and you start like that, so that when you scan, it generates the numbers numerically. There's a digitization sheet that carries the basic metadata that I'm talking about. The technician, of course, will complete the other technical details. And we save this digitization worksheet in the same folder where we save all our digital files. So when software would be available, of course, the descriptive metadata and rights and all those things will also go into that. Workflow for digitization on demand. Besides managing projects to digitize, we also manage digitization on demand, meaning when people in the search room come for copies, photocopies, it seems to be a thing of the past now. They're all asking for scans now. So there's a reproduction form that would come with the record to the lab. And once the records are digitized, it's either emailed or put on a flash drive, depending on what the researcher wants. This is just to give you a sample of what our digitization worksheet for the minutes of the House of Assembly for the Tobago records look like. The name of the document, the year, the type of record it's bound, the size, if it's single or double page record to scan, because you can scan either single on one side or double across the pages. The file name, typically we use TT for the country, any National Archives, and then we put afterwards whatever the collection is. Metadata, of course, I mentioned metadata, of course. You cannot put files into a system without being able to access. So metadata is essential for identification, discovery, and management, access, preservation, and use of that digital information. And of course, there are three types of metadata: the descriptive, which will come from archives or catalogs or your classification system; administrative data, which you will have, like for audiovisual, we will make sure and put rights, the copyright who is the creator of the material, and who has the intellectual property rights, for instance. Technical metadata describes the attributes of the digital image and helps to ensure it is rendered accurately. Digital image capture and quality control. Just the workflow here, you select the scanner settings for control of the quality of the image, you identify the resolution, bit depth, color code, etc., color mode. You select your master file format and the derivative if the scanner can accommodate both at the same time. You do a test scan, capture the image, view for quality. You may, at the end of the day, OCR if you'd like, if you have to help for indexing when you're able to put it into a catalog. Quality control, very important. And in most cases, I would do the quality control. Deborah will do her first take on the quality control when she scans the image. But when she's finished, for like a large, like that Tobago collection took a lot out of us. We had to go through to make sure, the image was quality enough. So because we didn't want to have to go back to rescan anything. Of course, we also have to check the metadata. It's not just the file alone, the digital image. We also have to ensure the metadata that goes with it is also there. And of course, we update the digitization spreadsheet after digitization, with the file size, date of digitization, who digitized, etc. Sorry. So a little bit about digital storage. Also, although I mentioned it before, locks, lots of copies, keep stuff safe. It's a cornerstone for digital preservation. And I mentioned again before, but online, offline, and offsite storage recommended. I know for small archives, it may be difficult to have all of these in place, but make sure you have more than one copies all over, So if it's on a hard drives, unfortunately, hard drives aren't foolproof. Solid state a little bit more so, but still not a guarantee. So have more than one copies at your home or somebody else's home, off the island, whatever. Cloud storage could be an option, but you have to explore any legal implications for that. Is there any copyrighted material that is going to be there? That one needs a little more thought. And actually, I wanted to ask the previous presenters about this digital colonialism and cloud storage, but I will have to send that question to them. The digital preservation strategy will kick in from here after you have it stored. Hopefully, when we get our software, we'll be able to take it to the next level. Checksum is something you do to put an algorithm onto your file so that if there's changes in the future, you can see. Again, my colleague will speak to that. And of course, you will get the digital files inputted into the software to facilitate access. So in summary, some of the lessons learned along the way. Digitization works requires staff that are meticulous, organized, results-oriented, and have an eye for detail. That's important. But it can be monotonous work. Breaks are required to minimize errors. QC to verify information is also important, especially when doing data entry for databases. I learned that the hard way recently when I went to renew my inspection certified copy when there were errors on my certified copy. So obviously verification from data entry did not happen. There is obviously a need for us to keep constantly retooling in the digital age to keep abreast of the technology and other changes. The future is digital archiving and preservation and online access. And actually, I was grateful to have done one of ICA's courses on managing digital archives. And I would recommend that if you really want to stay in this area. I mean, we all need to retool because we no ifs and buts. We are in this digital age. We also need to understand ICTs and how they work. Archivists, librarians, and records managers need to be IT savvy. It is not only for IT professionals. And teamwork is really required between IT personnel and the records managers, archivists, etc., especially software specialists. We cannot continue to work in silos to achieve results. I do get a lot of people asking about this. IT officers are being told to create a records management system when not even a records manager was consulted and that sort of thing. So we still have the siloing taking place, and we really need to work together. IT needs to understand what we do as archives, and we have been training our IT people, and they really come a long way and understanding what we need now. But we have to train them, hold their hands, and we will learn also from them as well. So if all this seems intimidating to you, I suggest you start small, do a pilot, and that will help you tweak your workflows and results that you want. Each digitization project will be different depending on your organizational context, resources, and staff. So you will need to adapt to your situation. Change management, that's a big one, will be required for the next stage of digitalization and digital transformation. How do you get staff and other people to move with you in that direction? So change, I've heard of projects that have failed. Things are lost, they can't find the backup. If the software has all the material in it and they can't retrieve the proprietary software. Just using the software, getting people to use it regularly is a challenge. So we have to come up with some sort of incentives to encourage people to really get on board. And I just want to end by saying our survival in the digital age really relies on us being relevant and agile and using the digital technologies to re-engineer our work, while responding, of course, to higher user and public demand for online access. So it's not an easy world we're in and a career we're in right now. There are lots of challenges, and we just have to embrace them and learn. I think the retooling all the time, that's the profession we're in, and actually all professions. IT is driving most of the professions.